Hi, everybody. Happy Monday and Happy New Year. My name is Carolina Navarro. I'm the Deputy Director of HSNY, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first lecture of 2024. Thank you. We have some big announcements before we get started. Okay, as you can see, we hit the ground running this year with weekday and weekend classes in NYC. Later this month, we're going to be traveling to Vancouver, hosted with Lugaro Jewelers. Then we're going to go to Hong Kong with the Armory, and then we're going to go to Washington, D.C. with Tiny Jewel Box, and if that's not enough, we're going to go to Chicago with Oak and Oscar. So if you live there, if you have any friends that live there, please let them know. 2024 might be the year where you can discover what makes a watch tick. We're also starting the year in really good company with 6 new sponsors. So we have Glashütte Original, Bulgari, J.N. Shapiro, Watch Time, Zenith, and MBNF. They've all signed on to support HSNY in our mission to advance the art and science of horology, and we're really thankful for their incredible support. Okay. And now the moment many of you have been waiting for. Our gala celebrating HSNY's 158th anniversary will take place on Saturday, April 6th, right across the street at the Harvard Club of New York City. If you've attended HSNY Gala, you know it's a really fun event where we get to dress up and celebrate the year's accomplishments, as well as award financial aid to watchmaking students. So please save the date and keep an eye out for tickets coming soon. Okay, and speaking of financial aid, our financial aid enrollment period is now live through March 1st. We have 8 different scholarships and awards available to help watchmakers succeed in every way. So if you're a student or you know someone going to watchmaking school, please let them know of this opportunity, and all details of 8 scholarships can be found on our website. Okay, that's enough for HSNY. So for tonight's lecture, we welcome a man whose name you may have already associated with HSNY. He was instrumental in hand engraving our 2023 lifetime membership card, which was sold at our last gala for $20,000, and helping us put money towards scholarships. Tonight, he's here to talk about hand engraving, what it entails, how to make a career out of it, and his personal story that led him to launch his own brand with hand engraving at the helm. Please join me in welcoming Artur Akmaev to the podium.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Artur Akmaev. I'm a Russian-born craftsman and wristwatch designer who moved to America 7 years ago. I currently reside in Santa Monica, California, working part-time for fellow HSNY Josh Shapiro, and also run my own business of crafting unique timepieces using my skills of hand engraving, enameling, and high-end finishing. So here today, I'm thrilled to talk about the art of hand engraving, and me as a professional, I'd like to share with you what was my path in getting into this craft and what is my process now, what tools I use, and techniques that I mastered over the years while creating unique timepieces. At a very early age, my parents exposed me to museum and art galleries, and my mom used to buy me books for me with images of art pieces from a wide range of cultural eras. So by the time I started middle school, I already knew what Renaissance is. And I also was showing strong ability to paint, and without any doubts and wasting time, I was invited to join an evening school for the arts, where I immersing myself in disciplines such as sculpturing, painting, architecture, and art history. And important part for me as a kid, it was I very like that each of those disciplines requires their own set of unique and sometimes expensive tools. And I cannot thank my parents enough for making those investments. So years later, I went to college in Moscow of arts and crafts named after Carl Fabergé, where I took my jewelry design and fabrication classes, and in the final year, of college, I arrived at the discipline of hand engraving and was taught how to make some of the tools like from scratch, which was kind of hard. Which was hard to like understand and like spending whole day grinding metal like just to make the shape for gravers. And for my final projects at the college, I have made a dagger totally from scratch, piece of metals, and I also carved the wood. So I'm proud of that. And the flask, which was I also formed it. I remember it was how I formed the whole piece, and the lid has also threads, also done by hand. That's one thing. So during that time in college, I also learned the history of jewelry, and especially about Carl Fabergé and his approach of collaborating with his work masters on projects. After college, I continued my education at the University of Applied Arts in Moscow and took a part-time job at the local watch repair shop. So that's where it all started, with the watches and movements. That was my first introduction to watch movements and operations of basic watch cleaning, restoration, and on occasions we had in the shop high-end watches with hand engraving on them. I was completely fascinated by the meticulous engraving and how it influenced the design of the watches. So that was the time of inspiration and motivation to bring my skills to the level where I can start making my watches of my own design and getting opportunities for collaboration with luxury watch brands and jewelry houses. And that was my starting point that brought me here. Okay, the interesting part, the hand engraving. So what is hand engraving? Hand engraving is a practice of creating an image on a piece of metal by carving and removing fractions from the surface. You're using hardened tool, sharpened, using a hardened and sharpened tool held in the palm and pushed by applying pressure. The tool is called graver, and today that word I'm going to say a lot of times, the graver. There are a few ways you can operate the graver and perform hand engraving. The hand pushing method, hammer and chisel, and pneumatic air system. Oops. Hand pushing method. I made a note, easy to sleep, and it is. It is easy to sleep. And I'll explain why. Hand pushing method is the most common and easiest way to begin with. You have a graver, the metal part, and the wooden handle. Usually the piece is sold separately. The graver has a tapering end and is intended to go into wooden piece, wooden handle, and should be tightly fitted, obviously. The length of the graver is about 4.5 inches long. Depends on how long your fingers. The graver is held between the thumb and index finger, with the handle placed in the palm of the hand. When starting a cut, the graver is pushed forward using only hand pressure. Applying more pushing force to create a deeper cut increases risk of breaking the graver. And opposite, when the engraved line becomes thinner, that means the graver is about to come off and potentially make a slip. So I'll explain it by hand, like with a hand. You applying pressure, more pressure you apply, less control you have of the graver. So in all situations of hand pushing process, maximum hand control is required to prevent the graver from slipping out, because more pressure you apply, less control you have of the graver. That means once it's like about to come off, you can lose the control. So that's why it's easy to sleep. Okay. Hammer and chisel method. Do not miss. You don't want to miss. This method I learned in college and I practiced just a little, so I don't really have I don't have any of my own pictures of doing it. So I used pictures from a book that I brought today with me about traditional art of hand engraving. So the hammer and chisel method is a complex technique to master, and especially at the beginning, is also a very exhausting one. You're hitting a lot and holding the hammers or a mallet. And the work is very much how it sounds. You hold the chisel in one hand, positioning the edge against the area that you wish to cut, while the hammer or a mallet in your other hand strikes the chisel, driving it through the material. Obviously, you hold the chisel and hammer very firmly in your hands. When cutting with a hammer and chisel, it's recommended to use lubricant. I also use oil when I carve like stainless steel or like platinum to prevent my gravers to break. Yeah, that's all about hammer and chisel. It's one lapse in technique and the entire project is likely ruined. Pretty much about hammer and chisel. Pneumatic air system. Sometimes two hands isn't enough, and I'll explain why. So pneumatic air system is combination of both the hammer and chisel and the push graver technique. So the pneumatic graver uses compressed air. You can see I'm holding the handle and there is a pipe. That's where the air goes inside the handpiece. The air drives a small self-contained piston inside the graver handpiece. Air pressure pushes the piston back and forward, hitting the back of a collet that holds the graver. So you can see the graver is here. This is the collet that holds the graver. And inside of this handpiece, there is a little piston that goes up and back and forward and hits the collet. That makes the graver pushes forward. Modern pneumatic systems have adjusting stroke length settings and air pressure from foot pedal control. So that's why I said sometimes two hands isn't enough, because you use one hand to hold the graver, the other hand you rotate your vise or your piece that you're engraving, and also then there's always work with your leg to provide the air into handpiece. So it's like, and also you're watching through microscopes, adjusting all the time. Yeah, so that's a lot to manage at once. I want to point out the biggest advantage of this method. The smooth cut is a direct result of increased number of lighter piston blows. So like I said, there is a little piston inside of handpiece, and you can adjust amount of those little hits, strokes. Sometimes it can be like 1,500 a minute, sometimes it can be 2,000. Depends on the metal you carve. So with silver, you can go with more amount of those strokes. With more like harder metal, steel, titanium, it's less. Also, the air, the blows. So yeah, it's about the strokes, the amount of strokes, simply. The process. What is the engraving process? To begin the engraving, first you need to have a clear outline. There are multiple ways to transfer a design from a paper onto a metal. Traditionally, and I at first used pencils, just drawing on the metal and then trying to repeat those lines with your graver. Another popular method that I also learned using a printed drawing on a paper placed on the metal printed side down. You rub with a Q-tip soaked in acetone the paper, and once the paper dries off, it leaves the printed ink on the metal. And in order to secure that ink, you may use a heat gun. It will fix the toner on the metal. Today, with the computer technology, I create designs with vector-based editing programs on my computer and transfer design on a fiber laser. And with fiber laser, I transfer all my designs on piece that I plan to engrave. Usually, it's just creating direct lines that then for further engraving. Sharpening. A lot of times engravers use a square-shaped graver that makes a V-cut. The shape works well for a variety of engraving styles. The graver is usually made out of high-speed steel or carbide. Carbide gravers require more time to form and grind at first, but because it's harder material than high-speed steel, and usually more valuable in the long run, last much longer. Gravers are ground to pointed shape with the relieved heels. On the bottom of the point with the face of the graver shaped to a specific angle. There are also many shapes of gravers available, and they all lead to a particular style of engraving and make a different result. Later I'll explain some other shapes. So after you have a drawing design on your metal and the graver is sharpened, you may begin the engraving by bringing. I also brought a model of the graver. So when I was talking about the angles and facets, you may after lecture can take a look. It's like a diamond you make in facets, and like I was telling earlier about the heels, you have a relieved heels on the tip of the graver that allows to make a bright cuts. Okay. So, what is to start the engraving? You bring the graver to the material and make in very light contact with the starting point at about 25-35 degrees. Once you feel that graver has entered the surface of the metal and begins to dig in, you may start pushing the graver down and a little forward. And using pneumatic air system, all what I'm doing is just holding and pressing pedal. And of course, direct it. Moving the handle of the graver up allows to go deeper, so the angle of attack is more steep. And moving the handle down, less steep, to go shallower or in the end come out of the cut. So once the desired depth has been established, for continuous line, the move should be straightforward. So you try not to play again. You establish the depth you want and just keep your hand straight and just the move is just pushing forward. It's important to keep your arm at one position. While the graver is held by one hand, the other hand holds or rotates, like I explained earlier with pneumatic air system. It rotates the vise or rotating the table where the item is being placed. Sometimes, if needed, to clean up the surface after engraving, I use a sandpaper glued on a flat piece of metal or wood. You can use a very fine file or burnisher. That makes the engraving look more sharp and stand out. But again, if it's needed, and sometimes with like lettering, I can do engraving after it's all the finishing been done, because I know already how to make a bright cut without any bores leaving. Okay. Tools that needed for hand engraving. So first of all, the important tool is the graver. The shape of the graver ultimately decides the shape of the cut, the furrow. And for those reasons, there are different shapes that engravers use. So V-shape. So here on the picture, this is the V-shape graver. Now you probably understand why I'm saying V, because it makes that V cut. This type of graver used for a majority of engraving jobs has a wide range of sharpening angles. Like, I like to use 120 degree, but for some jobs, engravers use a 70 degree or 90 degree. For doing lettering, you want to do like 120. That's one of my favorite graver. Also, V-shaped graver used for lettering, deep cutting, and bright cuts. They're also great for making scrolls and curves. Flat graver. Flat graver, another most favorable shape graver, commonly used for making white bright cuts, perfect for background removal, texturing, and shaping borders. Onglet graver, this is very traditional and one of the first shape of graver that I was introduced to make myself. It's very similar to the V-shaped graver, but the sides are slightly curved. And another one is round graver. Round graver has a tapered point with the straight sides and rounded tip. This is the easiest graver to shape and control. Good for beginners. Can be used for background removal, stone settings, some styles of lettering and scrolls. I'll take a water break. So here's my gravers. Here's the hand push engravers. You see they just metals and wooden handpiece. These are more modern styles of handpieces. They have better access to different gravers. They use collet system, so they changeable, having just one handpiece, but you can change the other gravers. And this is my air system handpiece. By itself, it's a piece of art, I think. So these are my tools. You can see I have a lot of, on the picture you can see a lot of this V-cut. You can see they're green. I marked them, they have a 70 degree, so they're very small. Sharpening the graver is the most crucial part of preparation before start the engraving. I use a graver hone made by GRS. GRS is a US company that makes a lot of tools for gravers and for jewelers. The sharpening hone has a high torque motor with direct drive, reversible and variable speed. It's a great tool for edging and shaping your graver. You use diamond discs. Okay. So this is this box. This is the sharpening hone called. You put on top a disc. So right now here, and here in the picture you see it's a ceramic disc used for polishing. You apply a little diamond paste on it, and it polishes your graver. Also, the important part is this fixture right here. This holds the graver, and the fixture features 2-degree dials. One sets angles for the shape, and the other dial sets the face angle. So, okay. So this is the graver. The making the shape of the graver, that's what you do on the side. Whatever degree you want, is 120, 90 degree. And the face of the graver, it's when you do this side. So that's where you do just vertically changing the angle. That's about sharpening. Next one. Microscopes. Microscope is the first major tool for hand engraving and jewelry. Nothing is going to help improving faster than microscope. Also, microscopes, I think, are investment for your eye health and product quality. I use high-tech microscopes, Leica, and for engraving, I use Zeiss. You can see here in the picture. Very nice microscopes. They allow me to do hand engraving on a very macro level that photographers like Adam Moore can really zoom in and see all the beauty. And that also allows me to create detailed and meticulously cut patterns and scenes. My first watches I've made without using microscope, just with a loop and like looking always through the loop, then cutting, looking through the loop. Nowadays, all the watches being examined by loops, sometimes by 10x, so you have to keep up with that too to make a product very good. Next tool is a ball vise. It's this big piece of casted iron. This is a necessary tool in hand engraving. The ball vise has 3 components. The fixed jar, that's where you hold your piece, and the cast iron base that looks like a ball and has the ability to rotate vertically, and because it sits on a rubber block, you can also change the angle and make more like vertically engraving, like good for cases or for jewelry, watch cases. And pneumatic engraving system. At the moment, I'm using a Lindsay Classic Air Graver system. It is a reliable and efficient piece of machinery. Importantly, it performs very well at low air pressure and low speed pulse. I can instantly set for different jobs, like for example, removing backgrounds where, like on a steel, where I need like really hard cutting, or engraving soft metals like silver and doing scrolls or shading. I have used a few different engraving machines before. Some of them provide very sensitive adjusting capability or have variety of different hand pieces, and I just find that it's just too many tools you need to buy to do sometimes just to do one job. So this air graver system made by Lindsay I find very efficient and unique, and unique in that the speed and power increase proportionally. That's what you like when you do engraving. That's about tools. Next one is hand engraving styles and techniques that I mastered over the years and brought into my watches. Scrolls. Scrolls, the basis motif, came to us from Roman and Greek art and architecture. One of the first technique that I was introduced to, it is free form of engraving with its infinite variety, has always been favorite among jewelers and engravers. You can see it on many jewelry pieces and watch parts, especially dials and balance cocks. Using books and albums with Victorian designs and graphics featuring spirals and circle motifs, I practiced drawing them on paper, trying to concentrate and imagine if I'm doing it on a metal. Often used round shape graver or V shape. So my process, I like to prepare the surface that I'm going to engrave the scrolls before I start the engraving. So I flatten the surface as much as I can. So after the engraving is done, I don't need to worry too much about the surface that's around the engraving area, because if I'm going to remove more surface, more engraving is going to vanish. Perfectly, like I mentioned before, when I do lettering on already finished parts, perfectly engraving can and should be done after the surface already has been finished. Also, to minimize the risk of scratching if the piece already been finished, I like to use tapes or lacquers just to cover the area that's not going to be engraved. That's about scrolls. If you notice here, this is the part of the card for HSNY that I made. This is a very nice hand engraving on a movement. This is one of my very old way how I used to do. Here you can see it's more closer. I like this one because it has a little more this 3D effect that I removed a little the background here. Sculptural engraving. Carving to shape and scraping away portions of the metal. This requires some physical effort and also precision, because once I remove metal, I cannot add it. This is my favorite method. As you can see, these pieces, these parts, dials, they all from my bespoke collection. I like to make scenes and sometimes multi-layer design, kind of like 3D. Like, for example, this Colosseum, you can see this part on the dial, and then the rest of the Colosseum will be on the main plate of the movement. So it kind of gives this effect that it's multi-layered. I find this technique is very challenging, especially for watches, because we don't have too much room on the dials. About the thickness of the dials always have to be like sometimes can be critical. It is a slow process that often takes a great deal of time to complete, but I like the outcome. This is, like I said, this is one of my favorite. Usually, I do use a lot of my flat gravers for this type of engraving. After the engraving is done, the surface I finish by smoothing or polishing with diamond paste. Lettering. Lettering, one of the engraver's jobs that I think is being requested the most often than anything else. Who wouldn't like to see a name or symbolic phrase beautifully engraved, especially on the gold or silver? Also, this job requires hours and hours of practice to show the superior quality. I find this tricky, and I find this enjoyable to engrave, but also tricky. And the complicated part is the finishing the cuts, the ending of the cuts. When you're cutting a line and arriving at the end, like especially when I was talking about the hand pushing. Lettering, I was never good at lettering with hand pushing because the end, you're always so easy to slip out and leave a little mark. So when you're cutting a line and arriving at the end, you want to finish the cut by breaking off a chip in front of the tool and throw out the graver. So it looks like that. It's the gravers will understand it's kind of magical moment. So when you cut the line, you finished. You want to finish it just by doing kind of kick. So the cut ends very nicely, and also you leave a very nice and smooth ending of the line of the cut. Another important exercise when practicing lettering is perfectly even width and depth lines when they are next to each other. Like you can see here, all these lines, they have to be perfectly parallel, because once it's different width, it's going to be very noticeable. So I think it looks nice here. It takes, most commonly used V-shaped gravers. Sometimes if letters are wide, I use a flat-shaped graver. So, like here, I think it can be visible that one side of this cut is being very, very flat. So that's where I used the flat-shaped graver. Next one, gold inlay. Inlay is a technique used for creating a contrasting color or texture where precisely cut pieces or wire being set into recess. That was previously carved on the surface of the base metal. usually harder than the metal being inlaid. For example, gold or silver inlaid into steel or platinum. Here, I put these pictures in order of the process and how the gold inlay really makes a big effect. Like I was talking about the recess or pockets, little pockets, you can see it here. You engrave them before, make them deep enough, then in those pockets you make a little teeth, like razor teeth with a graver, and using a brass-made punches to hammer in gold or silver. To clean up and flush the inlay with the surface of the main part, I use blocks with a sandpaper. Inlay technique has played a significant role in traditional jewelry, and I think in my watches, I like to sometimes bring this technique. Yeah. Yeah, maybe I'll show it here how it looks. So, yeah, I made it like you can see these pieces of gold. Not pretty, but this is how you hammer them in. And after that's been done, you're just removing with a sandpaper or like a file, very fine file, removing those pieces that's left, and make them even with the surface. Like this was when I was working, and this is finished. Like you can see what's been inlaid, that's what's left, and the rest is just comes off. Patterns and guilloche. Designing patterns is a fundamental principle used by many artists. Many engravers use repeated sets of lines and shapes to create visually appealing and meaningful works. Many of you know guilloche in watches, and in jewelry, it's usually used as a background for enameling, and in watches on the dials. So first time I practiced engraving guilloche by hand was back in college. We were making little ornaments. It was a Christmas time. We were making little ornaments with transparent enameling, and that was the whole point, learning the enameling. But the enameling part was very hard, intense, and not fun. But practicing this guilloche, doing it by hand, was a very enjoyable experience. We were taught to do more like geometrical patterns because they are easy to draw and kind of enjoyable when you cut them. Like here you can see this pattern, geometrical. I did it by hand. So this is a dial of one of my watch where I did transparent enamel, and so I did this guilloche that was, after the enameling was done, was visible, and it kind of played nicely with lights. A few years ago, I received an order for a custom watch with a more traditional outlook and a very specific pattern to be hand engraved in the middle. The pattern comes from a fossilized tree bark. It's called lepidodendron. It's a tree bark. This tree lived in Carboniferous period. So here you can see, this is actually a picture of the rock, and I have this rock I purchased from museum, I think in Poland. Yeah, so I smoothly went to this pattern that I engrave now. And in the year of 2022, I started this carbon collection, which was based on that project that I had years before, but this one is a little improved, and I added different metals and different combination of colors. And hand-engraved numerals, including Hindu and Arabic. Yeah, so I'd like to show here, when I was talking about the lasering, how I use the lasering method today. So I design on my computer a pattern or a drawing, and then laser machine it on the pieces, and so simply just engrave over it. It helps me to make the pattern consistent, and even though it's still hand engraved, handmade, you can see they're not perfectly matched, but I think close enough. Yeah, there is another, yeah, I find this one is another, my favorite, this diamond track I called, this pattern also done by hand. Each individual, this little pyramid, I engrave using flat graver that perfectly fits in this groove. And so when I cut them, they have to perfectly meet with each other on the bottom in the end. Yeah, so that's about it. Yeah, so my carbon collection watches the series that are ongoing that I'm making right now. Also, meanwhile, developing next exclusive series. I think to end my lecture, I would like to use this moment to briefly mention the latest update for Artur Akmaev watches. Like I mentioned before, I have ongoing series from Carbon Collection and working on the next series. I also, meanwhile, work on my business development and establishing a foundation for my brand and focusing on collaboration with luxury retailers. First time I'm saying I've partnered with an agency recently that has worked with luxury brands, including Fabergé and Versace, and retailers like Neiman Marcus and Tiffany. So I'm very excited to share with you guys. With my partners, I will be extending my limited edition series and bespoke commission projects. In addition, exploring new categories like carriage clock and pocket watches. So there's going to be more hand engraving projects and collaborations with watch brands and jewelry houses. This is it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
I know I wasn't perfect.
Thank you so much for your lecture. It was amazing. It's so nice to see how beautiful watches can be on the outside just as much on the inside. So now we're going to take some questions. If you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll come around with the microphone. And we'll start right here.
Hello, Artur.
Hi.
I would like to know, what is your favorite metal to engrave on, and also your least favorite metal to engrave on?
So for a lot of watches, I use spring steel. Spring steel is a high carbon steel. It's very hard to engrave. But what I do, you can anneal it and it becomes kind of soft enough to engrave, and it still gives you this bright cut like silver or gold does. But I do like the spring steel because it also then you can heat treat it to so many colors. But of course, gold is good. Gold is very good. Making bright cuts, making lettering. Lettering is just amazing. I think the contrast it gives from like bright cut to the like matte surface that you can make. Yeah, it's just on a level like of the best, I think. Yeah. So spring steel as a just artist, but as a product, as a making product, I think silver or gold. Yeah.
Artur, how does it look when you're engraving under a microscope? Do you have any videos you can show us of the process?
Okay. Yeah, I do have a video. There's no music though.
Wow. There we go.
No. I listen audiobooks, podcasts, therapists. I need to start to play it.
Let's see.
I can do some comments. You saw the perfectly, look at that scroll that comes. That's what you want to have. This is at live speed, correct? Sped up? No, it is sped up. It is sped up. It's about 3x speed. Usually it's slower. Here's at the speed I'm doing. It was like the end of the cut. Yes. And you're following some sort of... Yeah, like I was telling, I do on a laser, I make drawings on a laser, on a computer, and then transfer to laser, and laser makes these direction lines that I follow. There are patterns that you can find on the internet, or like you said, historically being drawn by artists, and then today you can just find and follow. Oh yeah, freehand, yeah. That's how I was taught in college. Just draw it with pencils and follow it, which is fine. Yeah, this was. Oh, I do scrolls like that. So yeah, all the, like you saw the scrolls, I even don't draw them with a pencil. I just it's like a free form. Like I said, maybe I should have more detailed say that the free form meaning I have a piece of metal just fixed and just cut how I want it. Yeah.
Okay, we have a question over here.
Thank you, Arthur, for being here.
Thank you.
My question is, what would you recommend to someone who's starting as far as the metal to use? Something soft like silver, or something medium? Thank
Yeah, usually, yeah, you start with silver. You can go on the internet stores and they usually sell blanks made out of copper or brass. No, buy silver. Don't make it complicated. It's already pretty complicated to begin, like for beginners. It's hard. So I know, like in those stores, you can online stores, you can buy copper. Copper, it's soft, but it's not enjoyable. Never liked it. Don't like the copper. It's like cutting butter. It cuts soft, but like I explained, this magic, I told you the graver like that. This magic where you end the line and make this kick, you're not gonna get that with a copper. It's not gonna happen. Unless. So in that case, it would be too soft. Yeah, the copper is too soft to enjoy the engraving process as itself, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Bronze is good, but then still makes more sense to buy silver. Yeah, yeah, and yeah.
Okay, one on this side.
Arthur, thank you for your time also.
Thank you.
I guess two-part question. When you're doing those spirals, I mean, you said you did it free form. When you're going into it, do you just hold that spiral until you're done and then pull it, or can you stop, look at it, keep going? And then also, particularly on that diamond pattern that you're doing around the dial, you're having to do repetitive, precise cuts. Do you ever create jigs or something to maintain that angle and make sure you hit it every time?
Yeah, good questions. So the first one, yeah, like I was saying, I have a ball vise, right? That's the vise that holds the piece on it. The ball vise has ability to rotate, but I never used it. It's always tightened, so it's not moving. And underneath the ball vise, I have a rotating table. So I move the table. It's complicated. Here it's why it's complicated, the process. So I'm using microscope, right? I'm looking at it, and I'm very, very zoom in. I have a very little, tiny area that I'm engraving and that I'm seeing in microscope. And sometimes when I do scrolls, I can rotate my ball vise, for example, and the scroll can go out of my visual area that I see under microscope. So it's not good. And if I want to continue that scroll and engrave something in the end, I don't see it. And in order for me to see it, I need to move it. But then once I move it, I lost that center. The ball vise lost the center. That's why the rotating table is here. The ball vise holds the piece centered with microscope, and the rotating table gives this ability to move, to rotate for scrolls, or for if I want to engrave here, but then I engrave one on that side, on different side. So I just move the ball vise, but my center of that rotating table is always centered with microscope. Yeah. So it is kind of tricky. I know for some people it's a little hard to adjust at first, a lot of struggling, because you always think you have a piece that you're engraving, you centered it, but then you made straight line, it's fine, but once you do a curved line, you rotate and it's off your visual area. Yeah. And the second question, yeah, so if that answers the question. The second question, the second answer, no, I do not have any jigs. When I engrave the pattern, you may see those wavy lines at first. And yeah, you may think that I can do it on a jig or straight line or something machine. But no, I do it by hand. Simply just the hand is being kind of at one angle all the time, just pushing forward, and then that rotating table by hand. I'm just, yeah. Yeah, correct, correct. And I have a lot of comments from my friends, doctors, and like surgical. They say, "Get something, get something." Yeah, so that's probably in future. Once I figure out all these lenses and cameras, that's what I'm going to focus on.
Okay, we have one question over here.
Yeah,
Artur, thank you so much for your presentation. Your engravings are beautiful.
thank you.
I'm curious, it doesn't seem like this happens often, but what do you do when you make a mistake? Do you melt back down the metal, or what do you do with all the shavings as well?
No, I just don't make mistakes. uh, rarely they do happen. Rarely they do happen. It depends. If it's really bad, it's bad. It's crap. It does happen. I mean, no, it happened. It happens rarely. If it does happen, and if it's not too bad, I usually, if I can, I just grind off a little of the surface, that metal, that piece that I'm engraving. It's one way. Another way, soft metals like silver or gold, I can just burnish it because it's soft metal. They kind of can go over each other. It does leave a little dent, but if, for example, that part will be engraved eventually, it's not going to be noticeable. So that works. But yeah, answering your question, you either grind that surface on a sandpaper or like using file, or using a burnisher. If it's not too deep, using a burnisher, kind of get metal over metal and kind of cover that slip.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi there. My question is, with your background, it seems like you have a more traditional background from Fabergé, and then you come to the U.S., and I see that one of the pieces that you worked on was like the Simpsons watch.
Yeah.
So it was just like, how do you go from a traditional background to a much more modern piece, and then the sheen, like, are you applying a different technique? Because the sheen of that piece is like very different from other pieces that you worked on. So thank you.
Yeah, The Simpsons. Yeah, that was with enameling, and no, it was just a commission. Like all my watches, and once I had the very first article, it was saying that I make custom pieces with the scenes and yeah, and so for example, like Simpsons. So someone wants a watch with a Simpson, and I got this question, and I said, yeah, I can do that. I use the enameling, all by hand engraved those recesses, like pockets, the windows that I can put the enamel, and yeah. For question about tradition and then making this like so different. I don't know. It was, like I said, I got a commission, like a person asked me, can you make, like, I'm a Simpsons fan, can you make a Simpson watch? I'm like, yeah, we can do it, well, let's try it. Because I had experience to do enameling, and I always mention that. And yeah, enameling is very hard to get watches with enamel, I think, these days. That's why maybe I got this project, yeah. But the Simpson was fun project, yeah, for sure. Thank you for bringing it up.
Okay, we're back on this side of the room.
You mentioned that in between the engravings, you should lubricate the piece of metal. I just assume trying to scrape into a piece of metal that's been oiled up must be very difficult. So, like, what's the process that you use, and I guess what kind of grade of oil would you use, in between the engravings?
Yeah, I actually wrote it down. There is like usually for like cutting a steel or titanium, like these very hard metals, cutters break. Like I use carbide gravers. They very hard, but it's like diamond. It just can't like break. And when you engrave metals like steel or titanium, you need to have consistent kind of and smooth operating. Oil helps. Oil helps to prevent that graver to break, to like chip. And yeah, that's. I think like I brought up the oiling, the lubricating when I was talking about hammer and chisel method. Usually that hammer and chisel method you do on car parts. It's kind of like one of the tradition to engrave car parts, like vintage cars. And they all kind of like steel pieces or like very hard metals, and they do want to, at one stroke, they do want to cut a lot. So that's why they traditionally use oil or like lubricants. I think they based out of like kerosene, something like that. For engravers, there are some already made oils and lubricants. Sometimes, yeah, or sometimes you can just like machinist for like cutting on CNC, like those kind of oils help. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. We're back here.
Artur, it was a wonderful lecture. Just had a question for you to follow up on that Simpsons theme. What's your inspiration when you decide that you want to engrave something of your own? Not a bespoke, but something that really speaks to you. What is your passion in terms of the design that comes out in your pieces?
Good question. I can describe on this carbon collection. Like years ago, a person asked me if I have any more like traditional watches that I can make, or if I have any. I said no, I don't have any, but I can make. And then he tells me I want to do this pattern that I don't know how many of you knew about this pattern. Like I had no idea about this tree bark that existed. So he gave me this idea, and then I'm sitting and researching and learning and getting into it. And most often, I'm really getting this inspiration after I receive something like projects like that. And with Simpsons, yeah, I watched as a kid Simpsons. We all did, and so the guy asked me to make the watch, and he liked the movie of Simpsons about EPA, right? And then I watched that movie, and I was back in Russia. EPA in Russia, not a question on the top list. So I learned a lot just from the Simpsons movie. I mean, I didn't learn a lot. I changed the perspective and the vision, I think. So I'm getting this inspiration after I get order and learning something. So that's the part. Yeah. The old ones were good. Like as a kid, I remember, yeah, the old ones, yeah, translated, nice. Yeah. No, I think they translated fair enough, good enough. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna do 3 more questions.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
I'm Chloe. Thank you for sharing your time and
Thank you.
gift. I have a 3-part question. Do you work on your own, or do you have a team that helps you complete some of the engravings? For the carbon collection, about how long did it take you to complete that end to end? And lastly, how many complex engravings do you complete in a year?
I work alone. it takes about 30 hours for the carbon collection from me to start and put it all together as a watch. I'm sorry, third question. Complex design. Right now I make, so 2 years. So last year I made 2 this complex design besides the carbon collection. Yeah.
Thank you. I actually have a question on that carbon collection. So that pattern isn't something, like you hadn't seen it before, so you had to do some research on it. Once you finally drew it out and vectored it, and however you had the design etched onto the plate itself, how many times did you practice engraving it just on a scrap piece before you're like, I'm good, I'm going to go start carving this 100 times?
Did I do that?
You did it?
Oh, did I practice? Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. The initial order was on steel. That was 5 years ago. My experience with steel was very little, so it took me really good time to practice to do it on the steel, and then to glue it, and yeah, not even annealing that steel. So, yeah.
But when you're doing that piece, do you ever like stop, come onto a scrap piece, and then try it one more time, make sure you got it?
No, I don't do that. I don't do that. It's a good thing that you brought up, because yeah, I've received not like question, but like some people like mention, oh, I like to do practice and bring back to this. No, I don't do that. Once I practiced, I think if I feel like I get to the point where I feel comfortable and confident that I don't feel like I need to get back. Yeah.
Outside of your watches, which are phenomenal, they're beautiful.
Thank you.
Are there any micro brands that you look at and be like, wow, that's something that you want to one up?
Like for collaboration, like doing together,
that,
or
no, that you look at them and that inspires you to go out there and make better engraved watches. Do you feel like are there any other brands out there that that you want to compete with? Not collaborate, but
Yeah, I understood. I think I'll just answer by saying my inspirational brands. Roger Dubis with the Knights, Van Cleef, and Fabergé. Yeah. Those are my inspirational pieces. Watches, watch brands, yeah, jewelry brands. Yeah.
Okay. Artur, thank you so much. Let's give Artur another round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
If you have any more questions, he's going to be here for a little bit. Thank you so much for coming, and we're really looking forward to a wonderful year ahead. So thank you. We'll see you at the next one, and get home safe.